I guess you're listening to this podcast because you're interested in property investment. And I bet you want to become a better property investor. So today I'm going to teach you how to become a successful property investor. And it's probably not what you think. In fact, it's not what most people do. Otherwise, more people would be successful. And then with Ken Race, we're going to have a chat about estate planning. It's not a very sexy topic, but it's a really important one to set yourself up right, to grow, protect, and to pass on your wealth to the people you want to pass it on to, and not to those who you don't want to pass it on to. And it's not just the tax man, but it's the in-laws, the outlaws, the other people as well. So Ken's got some great tips for estate planning, and that's relevant for you at whatever age you are along your journey. The sooner you get it right, the more protected you'll be because you don't know what shocks are going to come out of the side. And in my mindset moment, I'm going to discuss some important financial mindsets that will help you get to the next level. So welcome to today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the fifth time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
Over the years, I've come to the conclusion that when you do what most successful investors do, you get to become one of them, and if you don't, you won't. Interestingly, tax office statistics show that only about 16% of Australians own investment properties. There are about 2 million of us who own investment properties. Now, I know we get obsessed with property, so we think everyone's doing it, but in fact most don't. And then if you break those statistics down further, you'll find that around 71% of those own just one property. 19% own two, 6% own three, 2% own four, and only 1% of all the investors around own five, or 1% own 6 investments or more. In other words, if you do what most people do, you're going to get the same results as they get. Now, that's not a pretty sight. There's just over 20,000 people in Australia who own 6 properties or more. That's it. 20,000 people. So what you've got to do is do things differently to what you read in general, what you hear in general, and what most people do. Made me think, why don't most Australians become rich through property when there is good information out there? So I'd like to just share 6 simple reasons with you today. The first one is most people wait too long. Most people can't wait to succeed, but they're willing to wait to get started on the road to riches. Many are waiting for everything to be perfect before they get going. They wait for the right time in the cycle, or the right property, or the right economic environment, or the right interest rates, which means they never get going. The longer you wait to get started with your investing, the longer it's going to be before you acquire the money, the success, the freedom you want. You see, it takes time to grow wealth. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme like people tell you. It takes time for the power of leverage and compounding to work. You need to understand that the timing's never going to be perfect, and you're never going to have all the information you want. You need to develop the confidence to make an investment decision based on knowing enough and realizing that you'll learn the rest along the way. Now, you don't have to know it all because there are other people around who know more than you and will always know more than you. So why not hire them? Why not speak to the team at Metropole or people who've done it before and been involved before? Okay, so the first thing that stops the average Australian becoming rich is they wait too long. The second one is fear. Fear keeps most of us from getting what we want, especially in the matters of money. Some people fear taking on more debt, others fear failure, or even have the fear of success, believe it or not. Successful investors have learned to harness their fears, and rather than focus on the negatives, they use that fear to push them to take positive action. For example, rather than allowing the fear of debt to stop them taking on a commitment to buy an investment property, they use the fear of not moving forward in their lives, of always being dependent on their boss or the pension, to motivate them to invest. They use the fear of being stuck in their jobs for the rest of their life, without financial independence, without what they're craving, to motivate them to make a commitment. So don't let fear stop you. Another element that stops people becoming financially independent is waiting till they know enough. I know I've sort of mentioned that, but the fear of not knowing enough definitely prevents many investors from getting started. However, the irony is the more that you learn, the more you learn you don't know. Once you start learning about basic investment concepts, you suddenly realise there are a whole lot more things about investing in property you didn't understand. So the key is to recognise that while you don't know it all, and you never will, you do know enough to get started with your investing, and you're going to learn to apply your knowledge to the real world, surviving the mistakes that you're going to make and challenges along the way. But remember, you don't have to know it all. You can get people around you who do know it. If you're the smartest person in the team, you're in trouble. Now, another big mistake that stops many Australians developing financial independence is focusing on linear income rather than passive income. You see, not all income is created equal. Some streams are linear and some are passive and recurring. So if you're not making money while you sleep, you're never going to become rich. And the best way I know to do that is investing in income-producing residential real estate. The fifth thing holding a lot of potential investors back is not using money-making systems. A system for making money is something that takes the emotion out of your investment decisions and makes the results more reproducible. If you've been following me in my podcasts or my blogs, you'll know my system is investing in high-growth properties that are going to give you capital growth by choosing the right location, knowing that location is going to do 80% of the heavy lifting, and then finding properties that are going to outperform the averages by choosing the right sort of property for the demographic in those areas, and then adding value through renovations and redevelopment. By the way, I never sell my properties. I borrow against the increasing equity in my portfolio to buy more properties. By having a system, it takes the emotion out of my investing. Sure, it makes my investing boring, but it allows the rest of my life to be exciting. So, have you got a system? Have you got a system that works, that's known, that's proven, that's trusted, that works in all cycles? Because at the moment, a lot of people, as the market's picking up, are going to choose the wrong system. They're going to try and invest for cash flow, and residential real estate is not a cash flow play. Sure, you need cash flow, but that's down the end. You've got to go through the right stages. The first stage is building your asset base, then lowering your loan to value ratios, then eventually getting to the cash flow stage. Another thing that holds people back is not being patient. You've heard me quote Warren Buffett before when he said, wealth is the transfer of money from the impatient to the patient. As I've said, successful property investing is a long-term affair. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. The problem for many investors is that the successful buy-and-hold strategy that I advocate, it's boring. So instead, they speculate rather than invest. My system's too simple for intelligent people. They try to buck the trends and beat the trends, fight it, look for regional areas, look for hotspots rather than the big long-term trends. They look for the latest fad, or they speculate in growth areas. When you're tempted to do this, remember that real estate has been the number one long-term multi-millionaire maker through Australia's history. Yet most people that speculate in the latest fad have not made much money. So it's really quite simple. Decide to do what successful property investors do, and you're more likely to become a successful and wealthy property investor. And if you don't, then like most people, like most investors, you'll never become rich. As I've said a couple of times through this little chat, you shouldn't try and do it on your own. Now, I know I did when I started off. First of all, there weren't many good advisors around. Secondly, I thought I had to learn myself, but along the way I paid very heavy learning fees. You are going to pay the market learning fees. Most investors make a mistake the first few times they invest. That's the reason why most never get past their first property. You don't have to be the same. Why not get the independent team at Metropole, my team, on your side to help you, whether you're a beginning investor wanting to get started or an experienced investor wanting to grow your portfolio. As our markets are turning, this is the best counter-cyclical opportunity I've seen in a number of decades to get into the Sydney and Melbourne property markets as it's growing, or ride the wave in the Brisbane property market, which didn't have the downturn Melbourne and Sydney had, but it's on its way up. Now, if you choose to use the team at Metropole, go to metropole.com.au, find out about what we do. We don't sell properties. What we do is put a strategic plan together for you to tell you what's possible, to tell you what's realistic, to explain what you can do. And then if you choose to, you can use our buyer's agency services to help you find the right property. We don't fly in and out. We've got on-the-ground team, experienced investors, experienced licensed estate agents who've sold real estate before, who are going to help you find the right sort of property. That's the sort of perspective money can't buy. And then we'll help you manage the property, renovate the property, develop the property. We've got wealth advisory division as well. Metropole.com.au. Find out all about our services, and I look forward to being part of your wealth creation strategy.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In today's mindset session, I'm going to talk to you about the top 5 financial mindset mistakes many people are making. I'm sure by now you recognise I've mentored thousands of people over the last 12, 15 years or so, and I've recognised some common habits that I'd like to share with you. I've also recognised that becoming financially free is about your habits. It's not about getting lucky at the casino one night or some spectacular financial investment that went your way. It's about making good decisions day in, day out, and continuing to make those decisions over a long period of time until eventually they become a habit. And once you commit to becoming financially free, once you commit to becoming wealthy, you see it as a lifelong way of behaving, of thinking, rather than something you just manage to pull off. This means following a few rules on what we allow ourselves to think and dwell upon will get you pointing in the right direction. Now, of course, these differ from person to person, depending upon what your strengths are, your weaknesses are, but each of us should be guided by a few ideas of how we stay on track. Now, on this list could be things that you're going to do every day, like go to the gym, like learn something new, like listen to this podcast, but there should also be things on the list that you don't do. Now, what could they be? Well, they usually start with mindsets. There are a handful of mindsets that people adopt that take up a lot of their time and energy and stop them achieving their dreams, stop them even chasing their dreams. It holds them back. It stops people achieving wealth. So if you can avoid adopting any of the following common 5 mindsets I'm going to share with you, you're already going to be ahead of the game. And the first one is relying on a wage to get wealthy. Now, don't get me wrong. A wage is extremely important, but that's the mindset a lot of people have. Oh, my boss will take care of me, the government will take care of me, the pension will take care of me. Sure, having a wage, a salary will give you a roof over your head, food on the table. I'm not dismissing that, but you won't get ahead. You won't truly get ahead by working for somebody else. Think of all those tech entrepreneurs who've made billions of dollars in recent years. They are all innovators. They work for themselves. Now, you don't necessarily need to be an entrepreneur either. Of course, you can still work for somebody in a 9-to-5 job and on the side build a property investment business, a true business that will one day replace your personal exertion income. One thing's for certain, you need to drop the wage mindset and think like a business person or an entrepreneur. But boy, property business is a fun business to be in. The second mindset you should avoid is thinking investing is too hard. Look, nothing in life comes easy, but you don't need to have worked in finance for 40 years to make good investment decisions. Yeah, you need good advisors, you need to work hard, you need to be resilient, you need to be focused, but don't be fooled when people tell you it's too hard to invest. That's simply a cop-out that they're telling themselves. You see, everything that is easy today was once hard. The third mindset I want you to avoid is thinking money just causes problems. Now, why would anyone think that, you're saying? But boy, are there people out there. It's a big one for many people. There are people out there who think this. They've had a setback and they walk away from investing altogether. They decide, it's not worth it. Money's just not made for them. What they don't understand is that money's for everybody. And it's just what money represents to them that's the problem. Their own failure. But failure is a good thing, and money's nothing to fear or to be intimidated by. It's merely a means to an end. It's merely a way of just setting yourself financially free. That's where you want to head, isn't it? So there's nothing wrong with chasing that, is there? The fourth of the 5 mindsets I want to talk about now is thinking you don't deserve it. It's interesting how often this comes up. It's a subconscious thing. It's not a conscious thing. People won't tell you outright that they think they don't deserve to make money, but they'll show you that they think this way in many other ways. They self-sabotage themselves by blowing their money, by not committing to saving, by not chasing their dreams. They don't prioritise wealth because deep down they think it'll never happen to them. They think like a poor person who's always going to be poor rather than a person who's on their way to achieving wealth. Half the battle in becoming rich is giving yourself permission to become wealthy. And the fifth mindset you've got to avoid is that of being afraid of making a mistake. Now, this is a big one for many, many people. Mistakes aren't a bad thing. Look, no one likes making them, and we tend to fear them. We tend to fear making them. But for some people, it debilitates them. They're so afraid of messing up, they'd rather not even try. Now, how sad is that? After all, this isn't a dress rehearsal and we only have one chance in life to do what we really want to do. And it is what it is. Mistakes are part of life. And the more you aim for, the more mistakes you're going to make. But the only true failure in life is never letting yourself make a mistake. So don't compare your successes or your failures with anybody else. It's just too easy to do that today with Facebook and Instagram, and you see everybody's highlight reels. You don't see the bits on the cutting room floor, the mistakes. In particular, don't compare your chapter 1 with somebody else's chapter 12. Can you see how damaging the above 5 mindsets can be, the ones I just discussed? And yet they're very, very common. So ask yourself, have you ever fallen into one of these mindsets? If you have, I bet it's held you back. The good news is there's always time to change them. You see, money doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care who owns it. So why not have your share? Now we're going to talk about a topic that most of us don't like to think about, and many people say, that's not for me now, I'll look at it later on, I'll look at it when I'm older. Don't. Stay on. Pay attention, because we're going to talk about estate planning, and while it's not a fun thing to talk about, boy, is it important if you're genuinely interested in passing on a legacy to others who are important to you. And who better to talk to about this than my business partner and director of Metropole Wealth Advisory, Ken Race. Welcome, Ken.
Hi, Michael.
Now, I know it's a large part of what you do as a wealth strategist, so it's helping people plan for their future. This is the bit that they don't like planning about as much.
Yeah, human beings don't like to think of their demise, their death, and a lot of people stick their head in the sand for fear of thinking that if I think about my death, then maybe I will die. But that's a myth. It doesn't happen that way.
Well, I know you and I have known in the last year or two a couple of people who are close to us who are no longer with us, and they were not that old. And there's others who are young who things crop up and get in the way. So let's not make light of it, but let's make it easy for people to understand what's going on. And I think when you talk about estate planning, most people, first of all, they think of a will. And I've actually spoken to somebody just recently about it, and they said, I got a will. It's okay. I did it 35 years ago. Ken, true story. And she said she asked her solicitor recently, and he said, no need to upgrade it. 35 years ago. In the meantime, her son has got married, got separated and divorced, and having another partner. Boy, are the issues ahead.
Yeah, and look, I think over 70% of people don't have a will, and of those that do, most of them actually, can I say, are wrong in that it doesn't achieve what the people actually want. And that's because people follow the path of a general will, like you can get from the news agency or off the internet, or they go to their lawyer and ask for just a simple will. And that's money, I think, poorly spent, because in the majority of cases, that will actually does not meet the requirements of those people.
So, Ken, what does that mean? What does it mean to me, to you, if our will isn't set up correctly?
I think there's a couple of ramifications. The first one is your wishes won't be met. So without a will, the government will dictate who will get your estate being the assets that you own. And the way most states are set up, a person's spouse, life partner, won't necessarily get all of it. It'll be distributed amongst children that you may want to exclude, other siblings. In a worst case scenario, if you don't have family, the money will go to the government. So it's a very significant document, given that most people have now built up significant assets over their lifetime. If we just take two things into account, the family home, and a lot of people have got life insurance. So there's significant sums of money involved that can either help your loved ones on your death, or, can I say, make life a lot more agitated when they actually don't get what they think they're entitled to.
Well, I've heard of people who were just assuming that their superannuation or other assets that weren't in their own name, like in trusts, would go across. And in fact, it's a conversation I had with a family member not that long ago. And they said, oh, it'll just get passed on to my kids, won't it? I said, not necessarily.
No, because when you're looking at your estate planning, you need to talk to somebody who understands, I think, a number of items. And they are asset protection, estate planning, of course, taxation, superannuation, and structures, including trusts. Because you need to build an umbrella that goes across all those areas so that you can safely move assets to the next generation. And a will only covers assets that are in your personal name. So things such as superannuation and trusts, you don't own those assets. As much as you think you do not. So when you're doing your estate planning, you need other documents that'll move control or move the funds from your super and or trusts to where you want them to go. And unfortunately, trust law, tax law isn't necessarily a strength of a lot of lawyers. So when they're producing wills, they actually don't optimize the way those assets move to the next generation and inadvertently create taxation liabilities that could have been avoided.
Now, that's interesting. So I know as a wealth strategist, this is an area of strength that you and the team at Metropole Wealth Advisory have got. So you hinted a couple of times that having an incorrect will can leave your loved ones and your assets exposed. To what way? In what way?
Yeah, if I can say, the simple traditional will move assets from you on your death, let's say to the children. But we don't know whether our children are going to get sued, and therefore if they've got your assets, they could be lost. If your children end up in a family law court dispute, then those assets that you've moved to your children are available through the family law court. Moving assets to people, then you lose the flexibility of distributing income or capital gains to reduce the overall family tax liability. And quite punitively, there's something called a minus tax, which children under 18, if they're receiving income or capital gains, the tax rate is 66%. On a sliding scale down to 45 with Medicare levy. So you end up having assets that are heavily taxed and potentially lost through litigation or a family breakdown.
Boy, are there some potential issues if you get it wrong. So Ken, how do you avoid these problems?
So what you need to do is have a will that looks at all those areas. And a lot of people focus on who will get what. The big issue then is, how will those people receive their inheritance? The traditional will passes it direct to people, and then you end up with all those problems. But what you can do is you can create a will that as part of it has a trust, and it's a very special trust that the ATO and other statutory bodies accept, that when those assets go into that trust that is formed as part of your will, you get rid of a lot of those problems that I've talked about, such as asset protection, family law court disputes, flexibility of distribution, and you can even distribute to minor children, not at the 66 cents tax rate, but at the normal adult tax rate, which is zero for the first 18,200 and so on.
So what we're talking about is not the normal family trust or not the normal unit trust, but what's called a testamentary trust. And that has to be set up before you die. And what you're doing really is giving your loved ones control, but not ownership, which is the way smart people look after their assets anyway. And I know personally it's made a big, big difference to me in the estate planning we had with my parents. So you need somebody to set that up, and maybe somebody like the team at Metropole Wealth Advisory. Having said that, it's not a normal sort of trust that's done every day, so be careful who you ask for that. When you're looking at estate planning, though, Ken, other than the will, what other aspects should you be looking at?
Yeah, you've got to look at things like an enduring power of attorney. I mean, if you're in a coma, dementia, your will doesn't kick in yet because you haven't died. So you need an enduring power of attorney to allow other people to make decisions in your place. Some people also want what's called a medical power of attorney. So when do you turn the power off if you're on life support? You need things like a guardianship agreement. So who's going to look after your children if their parents or people who look after them pass away? You need special documentation to move your superannuation on your death to the right people. And depending on who gets your superannuation, it's either taxed in their hands or not taxed. So you need somebody who understands super to be able to say superannuation, if it goes to those people, would be taxed, but not to those people. So you need to have that framework of what assets will go to who, taking into account the best tax outcome.
So clearly a will isn't enough, Ken.
Certainly not. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, particularly if they've moved into pension stage, their superannuation pension is incorrectly set up so that on death, it basically forces all those funds to leave the super environment where it is taxed at a low rate, even to zero, and protected to an unsafe area where there are higher tax rates. So super is a big area that a lot of people get wrong.
Same with insurance, as you suggested.
Yep. And super then is a big one because on your death, if the super has paid for your life insurance, if it goes to the wrong person, there's a tax rate of 30% on the super payout of the life insurance. So that in a lot of cases could have been avoided by directing that life insurance to a more appropriate person in your family group.
Lots to think about, and the right time to think about it is when you're not ill, when you're not emotional, when you've got time to sit with a wealth strategist and formulate the plan. And then how often do you suggest one reviews it, revises it, Ken?
Look, I think when there's certainly been significant life changes, relationship changes, big changes in your wealth, if you're moving into business, if you're looking after loved ones, particularly parents, all those major milestones should review your estate planning needs. And I think apart from that, you should have a look at it at least every 2 to 3 years, if only to say things are the same. I'm happy with my previous will and how those assets were going to be distributed, and tick that off. And I've found that most people still make minor changes because they've had new relationships, their children have grown up, have maybe got married, they've got grandchildren. So lots of times when you would want to change your wishes. So certainly every 2 to 3 years, or a major life change.
Now, if you've got some benefit from listening to Ken Race and you want to find out more about his services at Metropole Wealth Advisory, go to metropole.com.au and click on the Wealth Advisory tab, because he specialises in helping his clients grow, protect and pass on their wealth, not just through property but through financial and wealth advice. But remember, this may relate to somebody close to you, somebody you know, and maybe you should get your parents to listen to this podcast as well, because most people don't get it right, as Ken said. So thank you very much, Ken Race. Thanks for teaching us about estate planning.
Thank you, Michael.
I hope you enjoyed the lessons in today's podcast. And if you got some benefit from it about how to become a more successful property investor, how to think differently in my mindset moment, or with Ken Race about estate planning, please pass the message on to somebody else, because just like I'm trying to help you become more financially independent, a more successful property investor, I'd like to help as many people as possible. And together we can do this. If every now and then you just tell one person, so why don't you do it today? Now, our listenership is growing amazingly. I'm very pleased and proud of how many people are listening to the show, and I appreciate that. And I particularly appreciate it when you leave a review on iTunes or whatever. And well, it's called Apple Podcast now, isn't it? And DC De Pablo left a 5-star review. And if I read your review out, as I'm about to read out DC De Pablo's one, and you email me, michael@metropole.com.au, I'd love to say thank you. And I'm going to do that by gifting you any one of my books. But what DC said was, it's like doing a university degree, except there's no HECS debt. Hey, that's a good one. I like that. The knowledge in this podcast that's delivered is incredibly useful for giving one the confidence and the tools to start a property investment journey and build a strong passive income through investing in property. I really recommend it. Well, thank you so much, DC De Pablo, and I look forward to helping as many people as possible. So please come back again twice a week when I'm going to share with you some advice on property investment, success and money. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney Podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?